On the heels of that very rusted out 66 Bassman, a concerned owner because he saw some corrosion on his chassis straps and his handle ends, which is fairly common with the plating on these things, brought in his 67. He says this is 67. It's either that or 68. It's strip edge with the black lines. We'll find out. And you want to make sure that it was not having any rust or corrosion issues, especially deep down where you could not see. And so far it looks quite good to me, but let's take it apart and see what we see. At some point, someone put in a good grounded power cable. So far, everything looks very good. The power and standby switch are really shiny, as if they've been replaced. And the fuse holder in there is a 2 amp. That's good. Not the fuse holder, but the fuse inside the fuse holder. Everything looks quite nice from the outside. Let's take this out of the cabinet and take a look. Well, I couldn't help but see in the inside when I opened this up. And I think this is going to be a very good news report. It just got some of the typical zinc oxide, what we call white rust on everything. Not too bad. That'll clean up very easily. Let me show you some really good news. It's been properly recapped in the past, F&Ts. I'll measure all the resistors, make sure nothing's drifted. They replaced one with this metal oxide and left 2 carbon comps. Given the quality of the work inside, I think it's probably fine. I hope to God whoever did the work before is not the person who wrote the positive sign on the chassis. I see that all the time where people write the positive because these two do alternate. This one's positive here, this one's negative here due to this series thing. But you should never need to write instructions to yourself on the chassis of an amp. That's what paper and pencil are for. Here endeth the rant. Let's flip it over and take a look at the inside. Well, whoever did this work was pretty good, if a little bit sloppy. You can see the new added heater balance resistors here, and the heater center tap, filament center tap lifted and heat shrinked off. The reason we want to do that is both because you get a better balance, a better hum rejection through high tolerance resistors than you get through the almost kind of random windings of a transformer. But also if there were to be an actual problem, a short in the heater supply, one of these little resistors will fuse open rather than the power transformer getting damaged. Whereas if you have the physical center tap connected, you can have wires melted or burn coils inside the transformer before the mains fuse can blow. So a low wattage, high tolerance resistor is usually the better choice. I've got a metal oxide here, that's fine. New diodes, good cap. Everything else here looks really good. The sloppiness is really in what you're going to see next. The ground is good. The power cable was installed fairly well. Let me check the neutral on that real fast. Yeah, you can see that they fused the neutral and switched the hot. I'm going to change that up. So what they did was good, but not as good as it should be. You always want to have the hot fused and switched. You don't want to... Fusing the neutral does not help you. Anyway, let's move on. Aside from the cathode bypass caps, which should have been changed, everything else in here is fairly stock. There's some discoloration here. That's just gunk. That'll all clean up. Of concern for me with all AB165s, these 400 volt rated caps in the phase inverter output, these are the only blue Ajax caps I ever run into which commonly fail. And they fail because they can have more than 400 volts present across them. If they've got 300 volts here, but the bias voltage dips low, or if you have 400 volts here unloaded and the bias voltage dips low, you can have more than 400 volts potential from this point to this point, and the cap over time breaks down. So I will verify that those are good. See this white wire here with insulation? That's the treble connection going to the treble pot, and they have shielded it using the B plus node here. So they're shielding with B plus, which can be dangerous, but the owner will never come in contact with that, and the other end is heat shrinked away. I've never found that to be necessary on a treble connection, but they did it well. Down here, they've got some changed resistors. It's very common for this 470K in AB165s to become noisy. So going with a metal film can be a good choice there. And that one, they had that and they were in the neighborhood. The value of that resistor to ground doesn't really make, not the value, but the type of that resistor doesn't really matter. That's all fine. The only other change thing is the old ceramic disc cap there on that plate resistor was replaced with an orange drop. The ceramic discs in these eventually can become microphonic or whatever, or absorb moisture, if I can talk. No big deal. So this is pretty much a stock amp from what I can see. Just maintained fairly well. Let's see what it sounds like, and then I'm going to call the owner. He had expressed interest after playing a Dumble-modded Fender Vibrolux reverb in Nashville the other day and having me do something along those lines, and he asked whether I could do that to one of his reissue Fenders, and I said, yeah, more cost than it's worth. You have to modify so much on those flimsy PCBs. It'd be better to do it with an eyelet board. And I knew he was bringing this Bassman in, and I said, well, if your Bassman is like a lot of Bassmans and it's all been hacked up and modded over the years, maybe that would be a good platform to make the bass channel into your Dumble thing. But as clean as this is, and as close to being original as this is, I would not want to make any further changes to this amp. I might do the AA864 output section, but that's not a radical thing, like making it a modded, hot-rodded, Dumble-y thing. So if he wants some kind of hot-rodded thing, maybe I'll build him one from scratch at some point. But I would like to hear this as it came from the factory, and then do some things just to address the noise floor, etc. Let's hook this up and take a quick listen. All right, let's take it out of standby. Slight hum when it powers up. Hum kind of wants to come back. Seems to be getting better now. Might be the sign of 6L6s that aren't too happy. A little microphonic. Oh, that's a very noisy phase inverter. Well, it may not be the phase inverter, maybe another tube that's just very sensitive to any tapping. So definitely not 100% as it came in. Let's see what it sounds like. Got the owner's exotic here. That popping is normal on the deep switch on the bass channel of an AB165. If you want it to go away, you can put a 1 meg or higher resistor either across the switch, or you can do it from this eyelet right here to ground right here. That's where I prefer to do it. Just keeps DC off that switch if there's any leak. Something is very microphonic in this amp. We'll figure that out. Let's see how the normal channel sounds. Yeah, so this amp definitely needs work. I think we've got a mismatched output tube situation. I'm going to pull preamp tubes one at a time and see if those microphonics go away. I can track it down to one particular tube. While the old RCA 7025 in V3 was microphonic, it is not the only one. So now we'll pull V1, which is for the bass channel. All right, so it's the old RCA 7025s in V1 and V3, which are the source of much of the microphonics. It doesn't mean that these are perfect, because now they have very little signal going to them. Let me grab some different 12AX7s just as a quick test. Okay, new 12AX7s here and here. Just some cheap ones that were pulls from another amp. They're getting replaced in that amp because they don't sound very good. This one's got a less gain than it should, just slightly. This one's a little bit noisier than it should be. But all the severe microphonics are out of this amp. So it's these old 7025 RCAs. The hum, maybe the output tube's mismatched, probably. It could also be leakage in the 400 volt, 22 nanofarad or 20 nanofarad output section, coupling caps like I mentioned before. So I'm going to measure DC there. They should have the same negative DC on the far side of them as each other. Let's see if there's a variance there. Now they're pretty much the same, negative 41.8. That's good news for those caps. May not be good news for these output tubes. Just as a giggle, they've got the same, and they've got the original grid leak resistors. Sometimes those things drift wildly and throw the balance off. 41.8. No, they seem okay as far as voltages go. So I suspect we just have mismatched 6L6s, and that hum in the background is much more likely to be a lack of good common mode cancellation than it is a problem with any of the filter caps in the amp. There's some things I'd like to change on this amp that I'll talk to the owner about. But aside from the preamp tubes, there doesn't, and maybe some cleaning up of sockets and pots, there doesn't seem to be anything majorly wrong. You know, and new 6L6s are almost to be expected after X many years. So this is going to be a good amp for the owner, and it can either be a very minor repair or a fairly straightforward series of upgrades to an already good amp. We'll see.